Welcome to my session. This session is all about Power BI adoption. I'm not going to talk it's not a technical session. There's little to no demos involved in here. If that isn't for you and you want to prefer a technical session, please feel free to make your way to another session now. Can't see anyone getting up and leaving. That's a good start. Excellent. So, welcome to my talk, a step-by-step guide to building a data-driven culture with Power BI. And I'm going to start this with a statement. I'm going to start with a statement that says, people sometimes refer to data as being the new gold, right? I prefer to describe it a little bit more like oil, right? When oil comes out of the ground, it's messy and mucky and useless and sticky and horrible. Put it through a refining process, and you end up with fuel, all right? And if you do that with data, you end up with fuel that can drive your business forward. Now, as I said, this talk is definitely more about people and processes than technology. We'll talk at a high level about how Power BI can help create a data-driven culture in your organization. But the main focus is going to be on making it work for people. Now, I know you all got mobile phones, so can I just ask you all to get them out, open up your camera, scan the QR code, please. You're going to see this slide twice at least today. Right, if you scan that QR code, it'll take you to the feedback form. Right, the event organisers here and the speakers, they all work hard to put the content together, to put the event on, and your feedback is really, really important for making things better, making the event better, perhaps even help make my presentation better. I do read all the comments, so please write anything down that you think is relevant, and if it's nice, that's good, and if it's not, then that's constructive criticism I can take as well. The organisers are facing a bit of a problem, so they tell me. People are not leaving that much feedback when they're taking it online compared to the old paper-based days. And they don't want to go back to the paper-based way of doing things. So they're encouraging us to get you all to complete this feedback and complete it online, scanning that QR code. You will get entered into a prize draw at the end of the day. And for each day you submit it, you have a chance for winning some prizes which take place out in the exhibition centre at some point. Now, before I get going, any questions on the feedback slide? Are we all comfortable with what I said with that? No questions at all about the character? Good, that's excellent. I'll move swiftly on then. So I'll give you a bit of information about me. I've been working with Microsoft technology and working in the data space for about 25 years-ish, roughly. In that time, I've had a variety of jobs from report writer, web developer, DBA, and for the last 17 years or so, I've been running a small consulting and training business, which is gettinellis.com. And we offer a lot of different things from data platform managed service through to data architecture, but more and more we're getting requests in to align what people are spending on their data platform with the strategy and the business. And this is where the idea for this talk has come from. If you've got any questions, it hasn't come up very well on that screen, I'll fix that for next time. My email address is gettin, that's getting with a Y, at gettinellis.com. Any questions at all on anything I talk about today, you're more than welcome to reach out and ask me a question. If you're up for expanding your network on LinkedIn, look me up on LinkedIn as well. It's always nice to connect to people who come to my talks. I am on Twitter or X, the Bond villain site these days. I do use that a little bit, and the Blue Sky thing I'm on, I don't use them as much as I use LinkedIn, though, so if you want to connect there, that's absolutely fine with me. So what are we going to talk about? We're talking about building a data-driven culture, and we've got quite a full room here today. I think lots of organizations run into some roadblocks and stumblers when it comes to actually making the thing work for the business and actually drive value from it. Has anyone here, just a quick show of hands, has anyone here had any issues making their business change to use data in a better way? Yes, excellent, good. So it's not just, that's why you're here, you're all in the right place. Right, and those challenges you face, they could vary. Right? It could be like maybe you're struggling to get the right buy-in from the right people. You haven't got the right leadership support. It might be you've got various different departments who like the way things are currently being done. Okay, and they're resisting to the change that you're trying to make. It might be that you haven't been able to identify a certain key stakeholder that can unlock the change that's needed. And we're going to talk about all these, including how we can go about building a data-driven mindset, getting data governance right, providing the right training, and talk a little bit about how Power BI can help build that culture. Now, I like to turn, some of you have seen my presentations before. Andy's looking perplexed there, right? But I like to turn my presentations into a bit of a story with a character and problems that hopefully you can resonate with. So I'm going to introduce you here to Berry Wand. Berry's career and background in her career is in technology and Microsoft Data Platform. She's been a report writer, she's been a web developer, she's been a DBA, and now she's looking to move into a different space. She's a consultant and trainer as well. So she's gained lots of experience, and through that, she's realized that the value data can bring to an organization. And she's decided she wanted to move into a leadership role so she can affect how data, well, she can affect the organization and help it make better use of its data. Now, the important thing for me to stress here is Berry is a figment of my imagination, okay? The real-life issues she encounters that I'm going to describe for you, they're actually based on true stories that I have seen on my travels, but the characters and the organizations, they are fictional. Now, Berry's excited. It's midsummer 2021. She's just secured her first role as the Chief Data Officer for Pontypandy Police. Right, that's Fireman Sam's fire service thing, just in case you were wondering. I like to keep the Welsh theme running through this. Now, for those of you that don't know, Chief Data Officer, or CDO as I'll refer it to, they're the people responsible for the management and governance of an organization's data assets. And lots of organizations, they're a relatively new role. Lots of organizations are embracing these roles as businesses are recognizing the value data can bring. And this is particularly true of both small and large private and public sectors alike. Now, as a Chief Data Officer for a leading police force, Berry's been charged with building a data-driven corporate culture, right? And she thinks she's got all that she needs to make this happen. Right? She was appointed by the Assistant Chief Constable. We're going to call him Graham. All right, for those of you that don't know the structure of a police force, the Assistant Chief Constable is basically the Chief Operating Officer. And Graham's got this vision for the force for the next 5 to 10 years where it's going to become data-driven. Berry's appointment is the first sort of stepping stone and building blocks in making that happen. All right, so she's got the vision, she's got the goals. She's now getting to the implementation and delivery of what that vision, of making that vision a reality. Now, a lot of you put your hands up when I talked about some of the challenges, and changing organizations, particularly a large organization like a police force, but even a small organization that's been embedded in the way of doing things for a long time, can be difficult. And sometimes understanding where to start is probably one of the hardest things to do, okay? Now, for an organization to change how it does things, we probably have to change the organizational culture a little bit. Right? And we want to align what we're doing in the data space to the overall strategy and goals of the organization at large. Right? So think of the organizational culture as the personality of the organization. It's going to influence how we make decisions, how we interact with each other, how work gets done. Right? So think of it as the way things are done around here. Now, if you've been trying to make change in an organization, you may have got a statement like this read to you. That's not how things are done around here. That's not how we do things. Now, organizational culture is deep-rooted in an organization. It can be influenced by many different factors, including the history and values of the organization, the leadership style of the leaders of the business, and the external environment as well. So if you apply that to our police scenario here, I'm looking around the room, and please nobody be offended, right? And I'm sure there's a few people in here that won't remember it as well. But if you're from the UK, you were bound to have seen the TV series The Bill. Right, a few little chuckles. Right. Traditionally, if you think of a police force, and having worked for a police force many years ago, it's not that far from the truth of how things work and how things get done. Right, so you got Frank Burnside and Ted Roach all acted off gut instincts and feel, and it's that type of culture that Berry's currently in. Now, if you've got a good, positive, strong organizational culture, you're going to end up with a more engaged, more committed workforce, better productivity, better outcomes. Right? If it's negative or if it's toxic in some way, that can lead to low morale, poor performance, and other things as well. So if we do need to change the culture, right, that can be a complex and a challenging proposition. Okay? And in some cases, becoming data-driven means we've got to make that significant change, which I think you'll all agree is a little bit more than a technology change and a little bit more than a technology problem. So it comes with all the challenges that mindset change will bring. Now, what I've got here are some steps that can help change an organizational culture, large and small. Right? And it all involves assessing what you've got. Okay, what are we currently like? Where do we want to get to? How do we want to behave and work in the future? What's our vision, values, and mission statement going forward, all aligning to the business? How do we get from where we are now, the Ted Roach approach, the Frank Burnside approach to being data-driven, we need a plan to get there. Right? So there needs to be specific actions and initiatives that are going to help drive that change. What we will also need to do is bring our employees with us. Right? If you involve employees in that change process, get their input, get their engagement, involve them in the discussions about what you want that culture to look like, right, you're going to get them on board and they're going to be more bought into the initiative. You need buy-in from the top. Your leaders need to lead by example. Right? They need to model the desired behavior that we're after, and whether that involves changing leadership style, communication methods, decision-making processes, then so be it. We need to provide the right training, make sure we are monitoring what we are trying to do and measuring what we were trying to do. There was a really good session. I've forgotten David's last name. There was a session this morning all around what gets measured gets done. And that's very, very true. So if you want this change to be impactful, you need to measure the change that you're making. And also, it is hard, it is tough. There will be successes. You want to celebrate those because that'll build excitement in it as well. Right? So it is a sustained effort. It's not an overnight fix. But and sometimes it might feel like it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Sometimes it might feel like it's 1 step forward, 3 steps back. But if you keep going, you will get there. Now, bringing this back to Berry, Berry's got a whole range of specific challenges she is faced with. Now, just remember what I said about the fiction stuff and the real-life stories. Right? What I'm about to tell you applies to Berry, but these are real-life scenarios I'm going to describe. So, lack of executive support. When I introduced Berry, she had the buy-in of the COO, Graham, who had set the vision for the next 5 to 10 years. Now, Berry rocked up to start her new job as Chief Data Officer. She was feeling very pleased and proud of herself on that Monday morning. On Tuesday morning, Graham parted company with the business, literally the next day. Graham being the COO, her chief sponsor, her champion. Now, can you imagine how would that make you feel if you'd just taken that job and your main sponsor had walked out the door? It probably make you feel like your dream job is turning into a little bit of a nightmare. But it's not just that. Now Graham has parted ways, and clearly there was some political power stakes game at play. The CEO and people who are highly ranked, the leaders of the organization, are making statements like, we don't need data to run this business. We know what we need to do in meetings. Right? That has happened. We don't need data to tell us what people are thinking. And I will share with you after, if we chat after, who that actually relates to and how that attitude ended up costing about £50 million. But I can't say it out here, but I'll tell you after. All right. She's also getting resistance to change. That's not how we do things around here. We've had a change control process and a security control process for accessing data for the last 30 years, and we're not changing it now. We want to move to a more agile way of working. We want to move to CI/CD. We want to move to I'll say it again, a more agile way of working. We want to make things more efficient, and you get kickback and resistance. Now, the police force, like many organizations, they have siloed data. Okay, they've got their line of business applications, things like their command and control system, the case and custody system, the crime system. Police will refer to that as their CRM, the customers they're dealing with and everybody that's in there. But they've got those line of business systems, each with a different data store. And as you can imagine, in a police force, there are security and privacy concerns we need to be worried about as well. All right, not just the sort of information relating to crime and the victims, but also the police officers and everything else that goes with that. And you're probably aware of some quite major security breaches that have hit the news in and around the police over the last few years or so. And the police force, being a public sector organisation, they are expected to do more with less. There are limited resources available for them to deliver against their goals and objectives. So these are the challenges in week one Berry is currently facing. All right, so currently, if you imagine, she's probably feeling pretty unsupported. She's probably feeling out on a limb a little bit. And if you're embedded in an organization, it can be quite easy to get caught up in the politics of what's going on in the business. All right, some of the stuff that's going on, you're trying to fight small change and getting things through can be really difficult. Okay, you know, the attitude, we don't need the data to tell us what people are thinking, or we don't need the data to help us make decisions. She's got to fight against that, and that's an internal thing. Okay, but she's come along to SQL Bits, and she's had a chat with me, or Andy, or Justin, or David, or anyone, and she's talked it through, and it helps take you out of that environment a little bit, where you can see the wood from the trees a little bit more. Okay, so how does Berry go about establishing a data culture? What's this step-by-step guide? Sorry, I did mention this at the start. I wrote this talk about 18 months ago, based off some work that I was doing. And from there, I turned it into a book with my business partner, Mark. That's in the top right-hand corner. I thought I'd taken them out. I'm not here to sell you books, right? I'm just saying, if you see that little red symbol in the corner, that is my book, and it's the QR code for it. This step-by-step guide, we're going to need to establish leadership support. We're going to need to overcome those resistance to change. We need to build people. We need to build people. We need to build a team. We need to get people on side. We need to identify our key stakeholders. If I forget a story about Sheldon Cooper, this is a real life story that I can't tell you. If I forget to mention Sheldon Cooper at some point today, you have to ask me before the end, and I'll come back to it. Right, we'll talk about governance. We'll talk about infrastructure, and we'll talk about the need for training. Now, if you think about needing buy-in from the top, why is that important? Because if it doesn't get that buy-in from the top, people don't take it that seriously. Right? And the key thing to remember with this is, do people really want a data culture? That's a question. Is that what, hands up if you want a data culture. A couple of people. Okay. Keep your hands up if you put your hands up. Oh, actually, sorry, put them down. Let's do it again. Hands up if you want the benefits a data culture can bring. And let the same hands go up. That's fine, right? When you're trying to sell this to an executive leadership team, it can sometimes feel like a technical solution. If you can sell them on the benefits and how it's going to help them deliver against their business goals, it's much easier to get them on side. Right? And if you look at the leadership in a business who might not be technical people, they might not be data people, but if you can tell them you can increase revenue, grow your revenue streams, reduce costs, and it doesn't have to cost the earth, and they're bound to have bought a data platform of some kind, because that's what businesses do. They might not be getting the absolute most out of it to help drive those business decisions. Now, you can demonstrate the value of data, right? You can start small and you can build. You can use case studies. You can have a look at how other people are using data to drive better decisions. And you can then, if you start small, maybe it's as simple as looking at your CI/CD pipeline, using Power BI to look at your GitHub repositories and your deployments and all the data that's generated with that. And you can see that your deployments fail 25% of the time. So 1 in 4 times someone's got to go and restart the domino chain to get things going again. If you can fix that and save that 25% of stopping and starting, you might save some money. And that might actually be quite a significant amount of money that demonstrates the win, and you can do that quite quickly. But the key here, business benefits, develop a strategy of how you can align your data strategy with the business outcomes you're after and the organization's overall goals. Have a roadmap of how you're going to embed this data culture into your business and the steps you need to achieve it. Resistance to change is also a difficult one, and I've got 6 steps here. You should just go and do that Monday morning, and you'll have your data culture by lunchtime. Clearly, that's not going to happen, right? But to break down that resistance, there are some things you can do. I've talked about selling the benefits to leadership, which is great. Sell the benefits to everybody who's showing that resistance as well. Okay. Seek out input, seek feedback, encourage people to participate in the event, right? But let the employees, let your stakeholders know why that change is necessary, right? And get them excited about the potential benefits. And doing nothing is an option that you've got. Right? We're not going to do that. What's the repercussions of doing that? Okay, so for example, I think Netflix, this is testing my memory now. Let's use Netflix as an example. They went to Blockbuster and offered them their idea, and they laughed them out of town. And then 10 years later, who's laughing now? All right, Dyson went to Hoover and tried to sell him a vacuum cleaner. And they said, "Where's the bag?" and kicked him out. Who's laughing now? All right, doing nothing can be as more costly than doing something. All right, so perhaps highlight the repercussions of doing nothing. If you involve your employees in the process, they're going to be bought in. You should still expect them to have concerns and fears. Anyone in here, just quick show of hands, how many people would describe themselves as a technical person working with either cloud or technology-based stuff? Fair few people. Is anyone in here that are solely sort of business-type people and looking to make better decisions but don't have the technical background? A couple of people. Okay, I asked that question. I've completely lost track of where I was going next with that. It was quite important as well. I guess where I'm going with it is people are going to have concerns and fears around that change. All right? AI is being fueled by data. Is anyone here fearful that AI is going to take their job anytime soon? A couple of people. Andy, yeah. Andy's working on a co-pilot to replace himself so we can go and sit on the beach somewhere. He might clone himself. Yeah, that might be a way to do it. But people will be concerned about change, right? They're fearful of it. They're going to worry about how it's going to impact on them. So you need to address those concerns. Give clear guidance on what's expected. That can remove that uncertainty as well and help make that change feel more manageable. And get your leaders to lead by example. Because if they're doing it, it'll be easier for everybody else to get on board and get involved. Now, stakeholders, right? There's a whole bunch of stakeholders at play here that you're going to need to make this work for you, and to make this change work for you. Whether it's the executive leadership team, you're definitely going to need those. You're definitely going to need your IT department because a lot of what you're going to want to do is going to involve them, and you might get quite a lot of resistance to change from your IT department depending on how long they've been embedded. You might have a data management team that's doing enterprise reporting, and this making reporting available to your federated user base and making it available through your business might get some resistance from your data management team. I'll try not to walk. I'm clearly shaking the camera here. Apologies. You want your business leaders on board because hopefully they're going to make better business-driven decisions. Your frontline staff and customers should be there as well. Now, identifying key stakeholders is difficult, right? And what I've got at the background, just on the left-hand side of that grid, is a stakeholder map. Those with low interest and high interest, and those with the ability to disturb what we want to do. And then it will dictate to us how we go about managing those. So if they've got no interest and no ability to disrupt our change, we can probably discard them as important. If they've got quite a high interest but not an ability to disrupt, we definitely want to keep them on side and keep them informed and so on and so forth. Right? But this is a little bit more than looking at an organization's org chart. It's not like looking at the structure of the business and working out who's who. And this is where my Sheldon story comes in. My Sheldon Cooper story comes in. When I was working for a police force, I think everybody would know, but I won't mention here just in case I get sued by anybody. But when I was working for a police force many years ago, they're in South Wales, by the way, right? And they're a police force, so you can do the maths on who they are. My boss when I joined South Wales Police was a guy called Sheldon Cooper. I promise you that was his name. If you Google him, Sheldon Cooper, head of ICT, South Wales Police, you will see Sheldon there. He lives in Porthcawl. I won't give any more information out on him, but he's 07985. He's retired since, Sheldon has. This was a few years ago. But he was head of the database team, or manager of the database team. He probably should have been head of IT or something else, because he had quite a significant influence over the business. And he did go on to be the head of IT after I left. But if you were trying to get change through at South Wales Police in IT in particular at this time, and you didn't have Sheldon on board, you couldn't get your change through. Because how the IT was structured and where it reported into, going back best part of 20 years, it reported into the finance structure. The finance director valued Sheldon's opinion more than probably anybody else. So if he wasn't on board and told the finance director that it wasn't a good thing to do, it generally didn't get done. You wouldn't find that from an org chart, but there will be stakeholders in your business that can disrupt. There's going to be key influencers, key people who can influence what's going on in your business. And sometimes that can actually disrupt your change more than buy-in from the senior leadership team. Building a data-driven mindset. I can see some people are taking photos of my slides. This is quite cool, this is. I like people taking photos of my slides. It's really good. They are available on my GitHub site as well, so you can go there and download them if you want to get them after. So if, there's a link on my website about it. But I like the photo taking. It's good. It makes me feel important. Building a data-driven mindset, right? We've talked about employees. I give you the example of the Bill and Sunhill Station, right? And it doesn't give you that sort of glowing sort of feel that you've got a whole bunch of people working in the police force that are data literate, right? And that's no offense to them, but they're acting on gut feel and hunches. Right, so we might need to provide some training in that space so all our employees have got a certain level of data literacy, and whether that's through workshops or seminars or whatever. Right, if we can use real-life examples to solidify what data can do for the business, that can be really, really useful as well. Right, show how data has been used to solve problems previously. Make data accessible. That's a challenge all of itself, but if the data is accessible to the right people who can then use it to make a decision, then great. I wrote a blog post a while back about encouraging failure and failing fast and failing often, and the most successful companies actually managed to do that. Right, fail fast, fail often. So that encourage experimentation sign there, the bullet number 4 or 5, is let people explore with the data, let them make some decisions using the data, let them try. Right, let them experiment. Experimentations are not always successful. If they knew the outcome of an experiment before we did it, right, there'd be no need to do the experiment in the first place. And doing all that will help us build this data culture. And there's bound to be people that really embrace it and get on board with it. Make them your champions, right? Because they can go out there and spread that message as well. Excuse me. Now, we will need some we're going to need some good data governance in place when we're building this data culture. I've given you the issues the police had with some of their data, particularly in and around privacy and security. I'll give you the example of it was a Northern Irish police service a while back, accidentally disclosed the names and addresses of their staff and police officers who work for them, and that was quite a significant security breach, but they're there all the time these days. All right? Going back to Barry's example in her police force, where they've got all these siloed systems, it's not quite like this now, but it was when she started. There was a lot of double key and double entry. So an operator, someone takes a command and control call, and a name gets put into the command and control system, and then an officer gets sent out. Someone's arrested, or nicked, as they would call them in the bill. And they end up in the police station. They get processed in a different station, different case and custody system. And if a crime has been committed, that'll get logged in the crime system, and there's a whole bunch of double keying going on. That would have definitely resulted in data quality management issues. So we need to make sure we've got the right process and procedures in place. That's not quite the case these days. It's a little bit more joined up. When it comes to access and sharing, some of this stuff is very sensitive. We need to make sure we get this right, particularly in a police force, because if you prosecute someone and there's issues with the data and the data quality, and who's had access to it and who has been able to write to it, cases have been thrown out of court as a direct result of that. When it comes to retention and archiving, perhaps the police is a little bit different to other organisations. They will have different regulatory stuff that they will need to do with their data, but we would need to, if we weren't in a police force, we would need to consider things like GDPR and other stuff that could impact on the decisions we make. We need to establish accountability and ownership of our data. Right? Who's got the right roles and responsibilities for managing it? Who do I need to ask who's going to give permission for X to view a certain data set? So we need those right structures in place with the right roles to help us on our way. Now, building a data culture, I talked about the enterprise IT bit. It doesn't mean the end of enterprise IT. So bringing this change, it doesn't mean you're out of a job, right? But it does mean that other people might be generating and creating reports. Now, we need to provide access to that data, so we need the right governance in place. We need to make that access as simple as possible, because some of the people who are trying to create reports and use this data to make decisions, they might not be data people, they might not be data analysts. They might simply just want to use that data and make it available to them. So they might just want access to the model or access to a model. We're going to need to give them training and support in how to use that. We want to encourage collaboration. Anyone here got a centre of excellence set up in and around it? Yeah, few less hands this time. Okay, well that's good for establishing a community, establishing standards and a baseline best practice. That can be really good for encouraging that collaboration. You need that governance in place, and you need a feedback mechanism so people can feedback as to what's working and what is not. Okay, so in any form of this building a data culture, there needs to be some form of self-service analytics. What that takes will very much depend on your business. Now, how do you build a data culture? Well, I like to ask Art. That's what I like to call this. Anyone here familiar with Art Williams? That's good. That means I can say what I like here and no one will know what I'm talking about. Art Williams, though, if you Google him, he ended up changing the insurance market in the US. So he's a US-based guy. He's from the South. He has a very Southern accent. I won't attempt to impersonate him when I read out what he's going to say. But he made a speech in the late 1980s about delivering change in organizations. Right? And these are some of the quotes that I like from it. Now, I first sort of, I heard this speech at a business coaching session I went to several years ago. It really did stick with me. Right? And you can apply what he talks about in that speech to making change even today. Right? And he says, there used to be a QR code on there that would take you to it on YouTube. If you just Google it on YouTube, it is there. It's really, really good. Right? You just do it. You got to be tough. You can't quit. You got to be a leader. You got to do whatever it takes to get the job done. And then he goes on to say, what's the primary difference between winners and losers? The winners do it and do it and do it and do it until the job gets done. Right. Now, when he made this speech, I was little. And when I watched it in this business coaching session, it had quite an impact on me. I'm like, oh, that's quite a good mindset to have. Right? And building a data culture can have a significant positive impact on your business and organization. Right? And if you're on that journey, keep going, don't quit, just do it. Right? Now, in Art's speech, right, it's a just do it speech. How do I do this, Art? You just do it. You just do it. You just do it. But what he said was this, and this made me laugh more than anything else. That's why I've included it here. So, Art said, I think it's almost impossible for a smart person to win in business in America today because I find smart people spend their whole lifetime figuring things out. They're always trying to figure out an easier way and a quicker way. And another thing I found out about smart people is they just don't get round to doing anything. He said nothing, but doing anything. Right? So for me, and applying this to data culture, you have to start and you have to keep going and you have to keep going and you have to keep going until the job gets done. Now, I'll update you on Barry in just a second. The question, you're all here though, room full of techies, is what has this got to do with Power BI? You spent the last half an hour talking about nothing related to technology. And that's because making this effective isn't really a technical solution all on its own. I think that's the key thing I want you to take away. Right? Now, Power BI can help us. Right? Is it going to answer all our problems? No, it's not. You could replace Power BI with anything in there, but this being a Microsoft conference and me being a Microsoft MVP, I thought I'd best make it about Power BI and possibly Fabric these days if data engineering is your thing as well. It can help overcome some of those challenges. Okay, so siloed data, for example, we'll get into these in a bit. It can definitely help with that. Data quality can have an impact with. In terms of data literacy, it's quite intuitive to use. There's lots of good resources out there, and it's got lots of security and privacy baked in as well. But when it comes to fixing the siloed data problem, it can enable your users to access and analyze data from those multiple different data sources in a centralized and consistent manner. Right, so we can connect to different data sources, whether it's SQL Server, whether it's Oracle, whether it's a CSV file, whether it's a SharePoint site, whether it's a web API, we can plug into it. From there, we can build ourselves a model, consolidating that data, unifying that data all in one place where we can then drive data-driven reports telling us that data story about what our data is telling us and how we should make better use of it. And it also helps with things like collaboration and sharing, because we can share those reports, we can make them available in the right place. The reason I'm emphasizing that point here is I've got a podcast. It hasn't had an airing for a while. It's probably a year out of date, and we're looking at season 4. But is any football fans in? I know we've got a few Evertonians, you're forgiven, a few Man United fans, and a Watford fan. We had a guy on our podcast called Simon Jones, and he calls himself a coach's coach, right? And he's done some work for the Lawn Tennis Association as well. But he was working extensively with Chelsea. And people came on our podcast, strange enough, it's a data podcast, we asked them all about data, but it was quite intriguing how a coach's coach or a coach or manager of a sports team would use data to make better decisions. Right? And he says, It's all about how you present the data to the coach and how they're going to use it, right? So I'll use Jurgen Klopp as an example. Jurgen Klopp probably has his iPad, and he might a Power BI report on the red zone and where players are and what their XG is might be useful for Jurgen Klopp. He said, but Sam Allardyce, the more traditional Frank Burnside type football manager, does it all off gut feel and hunches. Anyone here seen the film Mike Bassett, England Manager? Great film, right? Where Benson and Hedges get picked for England because he's written it off the back of a fag packet that an admin has then typed up. You need to present that in a different way for that type of person. But that fostering that collaboration can be really useful too. Power BI is not going to fix your data quality issues at source, but there's tooling in there, the data profiler, which you can get an understanding of your data. It can help you identify and find data quality issues. Through Power Query, you can transform your data, you can cleanse your data, you can perhaps fix some of those issues in there as well. It's not a magic wand solution, but it can help. And then building that data model is very important because we want that data model to be accurate. Right? And so if we put poor data in and the data quality in is poor, what the decisions we make based off that data are then likely to be very poor as well. From a data literacy perspective, right, we can create these wonderful visual storytelling reports in Power BI that will help our user take us on that journey, and we can control the flow, we can control what they see. I kind of describe some Power BI reports as a trip to IKEA. You know, you get taken around all the good stuff, look at what you want to buy, and then you end up making a decision at the end, buying more than you ever intended. You went in for meatballs, you've come out with a new kitchen. Right? It's that kind of approach. The self-service element and the collaboration, the center of excellence can really help. It can really help. What can it help? It can help embed that data-driven mindset. Right? Sharing reports, sharing skills, enabling others to see that data, allowing that cross-functional collaboration can be quite important. Now, I've done a lot of work in insurance companies. The insurance company shall remain nameless, but David knows them really well. They have this is going back a few years, they had several strands to their business and they just wouldn't work cross collaboratively. They wouldn't share data with each other, they wouldn't help make decisions. So it wasn't really a nice environment for being data driven to that extent. I think that has changed now because people have realized that there's a tremendous amount of value in it. When it comes to security, there's lots of features that Power BI can use to address our security concerns, whether it's role-based security, role-level security, the encryption that's baked in by default, the compliance with various different regulatory standards and different certifications that it's got, whether that's GDPR or ISO 27001, it is there for us to use. So it can address a lot of the security and privacy concerns that some organizations can have when they're taking this approach. Right, we want our people to collaborate, but we need to make sure it's the right people. I spoke to you about building a center of excellence and offering that training and support. If you've got that in place in your business already, that's great. There's some really good stuff actually on the Microsoft site about setting this up, right? And it can help in both achieving your short-term goals and your long-term goals as well. You end up with a centralized expertise that fosters collaboration, encourages data-driven decision-making. It can help you become more efficient, more innovative, more competitive, whether that's just through knowledge sharing, improving your decision-making, giving you more streamlined processes. Now, that's where Power BI can help with some of the challenges. What about the elephant in the room, though? How can it help with executive support and resistance to change? Well, it probably can help in those spaces too. It can't do it for you, but it can help and support you on that goal, right? So we're building a data-driven culture. We've got a lack of executive support. We've got resistance to change. To get that executive support, you can start small and build. I talked about the CI/CD process that may have changed, you know, the process a little bit and may have saved a few £1,000s across the year. That's a few £1,000s that hasn't cost anything to save. So you're instantly, thank you, David, you're instantly making an impact, and you can demonstrate that impact, okay? And just making that small improvement can get people on side. It's like, oh, well, if we can do this across our entire business processes, perhaps we can do, or perhaps we can make a little bit more. When it comes to resistance to change, again, it's showing that benefit, right? And if you've got some data that says if we don't do something, this might happen, right? And you can show this as well. So the resistance to change is a really good example. We all remember the pandemic, and if you were based in the UK, you'd have seen the daily updates from Chris Whitty and Sir Chris Whitty, and I can't remember the chief scientific advisor's name. He's gone out of my brain now. But they were showing you, if we do this, right, and the R rate gets here, we're going to have this number of hospitalizations and this number of people in intensive care and this number of people who are likely to die. If we can keep the R rate here, this is where we're going to end up. We're going to be in a much better position. All right? How many people listened to that and went, okay, I'm now going to resist the need to go out and do shopping? Granted, it didn't work for everybody, but it did help in governing the country at that time. Right? So it just showing that and showing what was going to happen really did help. So back to Berry. When we last spoke, Berry lost her sponsor, Graham. Right? They departed the day after she joined. There was a tremendous amount of resistance from the senior leadership team who remained behind. What Berry did, she kept going. Right? She didn't quit. She embraced her inner Art Williams. Right? When a sponsor left, she got put in IT and given the reports to look after. Right? But she didn't quit. She stuck to her remit. She had various different setbacks. She made some traction. She won over the CEO with small amounts of incremental change. She demonstrated value. She showed how the data could be used, firstly, to reduce costs, but then in other ways as well, as people were getting more and more bought in. So she started with a CI/CD pipeline. She then looked at reducing costs in overtime bills, right, using data to look at officer utilization when they're on overtime. Again, gaining more and more trust, more and more investment in what she was trying to do. She ended up with a seat on the board, and now data is used in everything from officer deployment to, this data is used in every decision that's made, right, from the very top down. So she was successful. Now, back at the start, I said Berry started her job in the summer of 2021. Does anyone know why I picked that date for the start of her job? I picked that date because in the UK, the average chief data officer remains in place for a grand total of 27 months. So if she was in that role now, it'd be about quitting time, right, on average. Right? Now, that average does vary, but these resistance to change, they do impact on people's ability to do, what we've spoken about today, they do impact on the ability to deliver that change. And if you can't overcome some of these problems, this is where your chief data officer has a tenure of 27 months. Remember, nobody wants a data culture. They want the benefit that it brings. Build that executive support, start small, grow your model, and help your non-technical people embrace the change. And I love this cartoon. It's one of my favorites. Right. Who wants change? Everybody. Who wants to change? All hands are down. Right. And if you're kind of in this boat, right, just talk about the implications of not addressing the problem. Okay. And I've got a talk tomorrow where I'm talking about security, governance, and ethics, where I've got a really good example of where this can be quite useful as well. But what's the risks associated with not investing in our data infrastructure? And you can go and find lots of use cases out there. I like the Tesco example, but there's lots of examples of use cases in different fields. The Tesco example, their club card that they started using way back in the 90s, gave them such an insight into their business that it allowed them to become one of the biggest organizations in the country at the time. I think they've declined a little bit now as more and more people have caught up, but they were able to establish themselves as a brand by understanding what people were buying and what they needed and wanted from their supermarket. There are others. Walmart have got a really good model around predicting hurricanes in the US and what to stock in stores when a hurricane hits and understanding buying habits during that time. So yes, candles are going to be useful in a hurricane, but who would have thought Pop-Tarts would be a top seller in hurricane time, right? It all kind of comes out of that. So that brings us to the end, what we've covered, what we need to build a data culture. We've given you some steps to look at. We've showed you where Berry is. She did end in success. She's now on to bigger and better things. We know how Power BI can help us along that journey, and hopefully we've given you some actions that you can take to get help. But that is it for today. There's the feedback slide. There is again. Nobody's asked me about the photo. Please, if you can leave us some feedback, that would be very, very, very appreciated. I'll leave that on there. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to reach out and ask. I'm here for, I think I've got 2 or 3 minutes left, David. 5. 5 minutes. So we finished a little bit early, but thank you very much.